Good morning, Biology 20s. Today we're going to start on our nutrition and digestion unit. So we'll take a look at this nutrition notes guide. I'm going to start by asking you a question. What did you eat today? What did you have? What nutrients were in the food you ate? So here's an example. Like I had some almonds and some tea and a little bit of yogurt and some fruit. So what kind of macronutrients would have been found in there? Macronutrients are the food molecules that I need large amounts of. So what kind of fats were there? What kind of nucleic acids were there? What kind of carbs? And how much protein is present in there? Okay, so like yogurt, you guys know is high in protein, but it also has a fair amount of sugar. I had some nuts and those almonds, they have a little bit of fat in them, protein, carbs, right? So what macronutrients did you have in your meal today? What about the micronutrients? Like, why would I eat almonds? Well, they have a good amount of the mineral magnesium. And what kind of vitamins might have been present in my calcium? Well, present in my yogurt. So a mineral might be calcium, the vitamin might be vitamin D, right? Well, we need to eat all these things to keep our body in balance. So what nutrients were in the food that you ate today? Okay, so you can think about that. It's food for thought. Okay, so let's look at these macromolecules and talk about each of them and what their main function is in the body, some examples of them, etc. So our first one that we're going to look at is going to be carbs or sugars, and those are the main source of energy for your body, and that's where we store our energy. So sugars, starches, glycogen, these are all examples of the macromolecules that make up the carbs, the sugars that we eat in our body. Okay, lipids. Lipids are the fats, the oils, the phospholipids, and they're important for storing energy and also for your cell membranes of your body. Now, most of these macromolecules are made up of building blocks that are called monomers. So mono, of course, that prefix means one. And so imagine one little tiny molecule. Here's another molecule. Here's another. Here's these monomers, these individual subunits. When you put them together, you link them up to form a polymer. So when we're looking at carbs, well, they're made up of individual molecules, and then you join them together. It could be hundreds or even thousands of these individual monomer units that are hooked up and linked up together to form a larger polymer. So lipids are made up of glycerol and fatty acids, and they are important for fats and oils and energy in your body. Okay, next up, proteins. Well, what are proteins? They're made up of individual subunits, monomers, called amino acids. And those amino acids join up together to form larger units called peptides or polypeptides, and then those join up to make the large polymer, the protein. So what are some examples of these proteins that you find in your body? Well, hemoglobin is a protein in your red blood cells to transport oxygen. Fibrin is important for blood clotting. Collagen is a support molecule, so in your lips and in your skin and hair, and you even hear about some celebrities and stuff getting collagen injections so that their lips look all big. Well, that is a protein molecule. Antibodies for immunity, disease fighting, enzymes for catalyzing reactions, speeding them up. And then, of course, you already know about actin and myosin. Those are proteins that help with your muscle contraction. And the last molecule, macromolecule, I guess, to look at is the information molecule, the hereditary material, DNA and RNA. These are the nucleic acids. And so you know DNA is in the nucleus of your cells, and you pass it on to your offspring, and it decides what hair color you have and how tall you are and so forth. So those are the information, the hereditary molecules. Okay, so next we're going to look on the following page here, and how do we make up these polymers and monomers? So we've already talked about the 4 categories of macromolecules. How do we make up these large molecules from small ones, and how do we break down molecules? What are the 2 main processes in our body? Well, here we have 2 smaller molecules of monomer And then here's another monomer. These are our building blocks. And we're going to put them together to make a larger polymer. And to do that, we are going to remove a molecule of water. And so this process is called dehydration synthesis. And so that's number 3 here. You removed a molecule of water from each of the monomers, you get a larger molecule, a polymer. All right, the opposite process is called hydrolysis. And so that's the example here. What are we doing? We're adding a molecule of water to a large polymer, and it breaks it down into smaller molecules. Okay, so that's kind of the 2 main processes in making and breaking up molecules. Now we're going to go into a little bit detail and talk about each of the macromolecules. So we're going to next discuss our carbs, the sugars that are used in our body, and what are they important for? Well, they're energy molecules. They're organic, they contain carbon, and the 2 kind of major classes of the simple sugars, simple carbs, are called monosaccharides, where there's just one single sugar, and disaccharides. And of course, di means 2. So some examples of our simple sugars that are monosaccharides are like glucose, that's your blood sugar, fructose in fruit and vegetables, and galactose. Your disaccharides are basically 2, right? We've got 2 monosaccharides. They're joined together by that process called dehydration synthesis to make a larger molecule. So sucrose in table sugar, maltose that you would find in beer, lactose, milk sugar. And you hear some people are called lactose intolerant, right? They're not able to break down the milk sugar. And so if they eat milk or yogurt or cheese, they get lots of gas and bloating and they don't feel good because they are lactose intolerant. So sugars, main source of energy for the body, readily available energy source for our body. What other kind of sugars are there? Well, the next kind is our complex carbs, also known as our polysaccharides. Now, these are huge polymers made up of hundreds or thousands of simple sugars that are linked together. So some examples of our polysaccharides are complex carbs. Cellulose, these are found in the walls of plants, and this is a really good source of fiber for your diet. Helps keep you regular so you can poop regularly. Number 2 here, starch. This is another polysaccharide or complex carb. This is how sugar is stored in plants, right? And so starchy plants might be like a potato, right? It is a stored form of sugar. In animals, humans like us, we don't store sugar. We don't even make starch at all. We store our sugar as a molecule called glycogen instead. And there's another 4th polysaccharide or complex carb called chitin. And insect exoskeletons have this. That's why when you step on them, or if any of you are brave enough to have like eaten a cricket, that's why they're crunchy, right? They have this insect exoskeleton, the outside part of their body, and this is a complex carb, a complex sugar. Okay. Next, we're going to move on to the next page and talk about fats. Another name for fats are lipids. And when we look at lipids, there's a bunch of different types of lipids that we need to be aware of. So that includes our triglycerides. Tri means 3, right? Triglycerides, mono is 1, di is 2, triglycerides. Why? Because there's 1 glycerol molecule, and count them up, 1, 2, 3 fatty acids. Okay, so these are just neutral fats found in your body. And then we have our saturated and unsaturated fats. And so you probably heard these terms, right? Lots of food labels have this information on it, talking about saturated fats, which are typically not very good for you, right? They do not have carbon-carbon double bonds. So if you're ever asked about the structure of these, you look at the structure of these molecules, and it's all single bonds between the carbons, and they have the maximum number of hydrogen atoms. So what kind of things would we find saturated fats in? Well, saturated fats we would see in animal fats. So things like butter and lard, and these are all solid at room temperature. And again, these are the ones that are not as healthy for you. They're harder for our body to break down. On the other hand, when you hear these terms unsaturated fats, these are the ones that are actually good for you. And they have carbon-carbon double bonds, and that often puts a kink in the molecule. And because of that, they do not have the maximum number of hydrogen atoms. So when you look at these diagrams and you compare between the saturated, which is typically like a linear or straight molecule like this, here's the saturated fat, just looks like a straight line like this. And this guy has a kink in it. And why does it have a kink in it? Because it's unsaturated, and it has this double bond that is located here. So where would I find these unsaturated, these good fats? Well, these unsaturated fats are plant fats. And so things like canola oil and olive oil, they are better for you. And they are generally liquid at room temperature. And they're the more healthy fats that people prefer to eat over the over the animal fats, the less good for you fats. Okay, what other kind of fats do we have? Well, phospholipids, those are important in your cell membranes, right? We learned about those in Science 10, where we talked about the head of the molecule points out and the tails point in, and that's how we form a little phospholipid bilayer. And that phospholipid bilayer, some people kind of draw them like this. So you've got your heads pointing out and your tails pointing in, and your phospholipid bilayer of your cell membranes is semi-permeable. And that's our phospholipid molecules. What else do we got in our category of fats? Well, we have steroids, and these are based on the this ringed molecule, cholesterol, and that's where we get our male and female sex hormones. So males testosterone, females estrogen. Now, another note about fats is we talked about sugars being the most readily available, but fats actually have more energy in them. They're actually our best source of energy. They are packed with energy, but they're not as readily available for our body to use. So carbs are going to be used first in your body. They're going to be broken down first, and fats are going to be the best form of energy, but they're not as easy to break down. They're not as available to us. Okay, so that's number one of my nutrition video, and we're going to continue on in next video in a couple minutes here, and then that will give you enough information to complete this booklet and the worksheet that goes along with it. Okay, back in a bit to finish up nutrition.